Hey, this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary. You're listening to the Inside the C-Suite podcast. We got Taylor Liggett on today, and we're going to learn all about his journey and some of his story and his career. We're always fascinated to kind of hear how people started and where they are now. This isn't the end of the story nor the journey, but this is
Let's
the
hope.
step. No, oh,
Let's hope.
no. That's a good point. Although that is good to alliterate there. That
We're
point there,
going
right?
into a weekend. We never
Dude,
know.
that escalated quickly, like really quickly.
Great.
Taylor,
Sorry,
wow.
Taylor.
Taylor, would you do us a favor and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, William. And
Sure.
thanks to both of you for having me. Real pleasure to be on and
Sure.
chat with you guys. So Taylor Liggett, I'm the Chief Growth Officer at ID.me. So for those of you who don't know, ID.me is the largest digital wallet and trusted digital identity network that exists in the US, and I believe the largest private digital identity network in the world. So I oversee growth, with really what that means is a lot of strategy, business development, product innovation, a lot of the commercial expansion that we're doing. So a lot of fun stuff falls into that. That's what I'm up to nowadays.
And your entire history, I won't say your entire, but at least your background,
LinkedIn profile.
your
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile
There
background
you go. Yeah.
is just all
In identity. Yeah.
And like, have you done
Very
anything else in
consistent.
your life?
Well, I mean, look, so
Ryan.
this is where we'll get interesting, because I found identity through sort of a curveball, and
Okay.
and really, like, let you guys guide as to when we want to kind of like jump into how I got there. But I'll answer.
Let's jump in. Let's just get right to the good stuff.
So all right, so I'll tell you guys a story. There's a little bit of a wind up that will be required.
Okay.
Right. But so as I was growing up, I don't even remember why this happened, but I ended up at a pretty young age. I was born in the early 80s, kind of coming of age in the 90s. I ended up at a relatively early age building a computer with my dad, like a PC with my dad, right? And it was just like that moment, the only moment I can recall during my childhood where I just like, it clicked. I'm like, ooh, I really like this. This makes sense. It was intuitive. So I went full on nerd, like reading DOS books, like full
Never go full nerd.
Did you have DOS for Dummies?
What's that?
Yeah, is that DOS for Dummies back there? Is that what we're looking at?
Probably something like this. Was before the Dummies series.
Oh yeah.
So when I went to go to school, like I went to go for computer information systems, and that was what I knew, and so on. And school was never like my greatest thing. I was a smart kid. It just, a structured classroom was never sort of my greatest thing. So I ended up, like, while I was in school, there was a new call center that had opened up. And I don't even remember what they were paying. It was, like $10, $11 or whatever. But to me at the time, I'm like, oh, that's money. Like, I'm going to go stop being a poor college kid, go.
Yeah.
And so I started it. This was like an outsourced call center. Okay. So it's like a call center that did, a lot of work. And they just won this big contract with Quest. So Quest at the time was like a big telco, right? They were doing a lot of different services. And this was kind of during the initial boom of like mobile phones, right? Cell phones were all coming out in early 2000s. And so the specific job I was hired into was a save desk, like retention services, right? So it's like the customers that are pissed off, they're canceling, they're calling.
Escalation.
And the metric was like, what percentage of those customers could you stop from canceling, right? Could you like resolve and stop from canceling? So I do this amongst this group, and a couple weeks, month, whatever had kind of gone by, and we're told that there's these like Quest executives coming on site, so dress nice, being the best people, whatever. Well, I get pulled in a room with these Quest execs and with my leadership at the time. And I'm like 19 or whatever, 20 maybe. And so I get pulled in this room, and the gist of it was, they're like, so we've been doing this program for a couple of years, and the highest save rate we've ever seen is like 45%. It's the best we've ever seen. And you're at like 80%. Like, what's going on? And I had this moment of two things. One, I'm like, oh, they think I'm cheating. Was
Mhm.
long.
That's what I was thinking. You were manipulating
No,
the data.
Yeah.
no.
And
I
then
just think you
two
you
was
you know how to
like,
hack it. Yeah,
holy shit, like I'm really good at this. Like,
yeah,
like this whole like people, sales, like that whole space, I had not been tracking at all
right,
as a like professional
Right.
focus. And that
right.
was like a watershed moment for me, right? Like that was a giant epiphany where I'm like, oh wait, like yes, I love technical, yes, but like maybe I got this wrong. Maybe my
Right,
greatest skill set is something
right,
else. And
right.
that was a huge pivot point for me where I just sort of like started to go all in that direction. So it's a very long way of saying, Ryan,
Well,
like
what was the how? What was what? If you can tell us, what was? How'd you get to the 80% mark or over the 80% mark?
yeah,
Like, what was
no,
the bit?
I mean, look, it wasn't a bit. It's the first, it was genuinely like,
So, shit, this isn't false. This isn't false integrity or false caring or anything like this. No,
no.
no,
I
you
mean,
you actually cared. Got it.
look, that was, well, first of all, it was just a great challenge to me, right? Like
Right,
that was how I went about it. Like it was this
right.
awesome challenge to get someone who's calling it, who's like, membership packaging, blah, 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 I'm here.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And to bring that person to at the end to be like, keeping it, thank you so much for your help, I really
Oh
appreciate it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was the ultimate challenge. And, it was a
This is
combination of like genuine sort of empathy and listening and like really hearing them out, being empowered to actually have things that could solve whatever issues are at hand.
right.
Right. And then, seeing that through, and of course, like some salesmanship and so on sort of involved in doing that. But, yeah, it was something that I was like, obviously I'd gone through some training for, but I just found like I had a skill set that was conducive to some of those
Right.
areas.
That's
So
fantastic. Go ahead, Ryan.
so if we go back to Little Taylor, right? So you're like way back, elementary school, middle school. Did you have these traits? Like, where did you start, right? So, I mean, people that listen to
It
this
couldn't have been in
show,
college. It couldn't have been in college. It
Yeah.
yeah,
had to have
it
started
had to
somewhere
be
before.
before. People that listen to this show, like, they want to know the
The
journey, right?
banana
Like,
stand. You were in
how
a
do I
banana
get
stand
there?
somewhere. So
So I mean, look,
I feel like
yes,
there's a story here.
I no, I
children's
absolutely.
ministry.
Like I wasn't like an introverted kid that suddenly
Right.
like, like that was obviously not me.
Yeah.
I've always been extroverted, and I think some of this, like my mother is a force of nature. Like she is just one of those people that can walk into a room and just get. So like I grew up a lot, I think, with that in that type of environment. My family sort of like that, and so yeah, I think these skills sort of existed. I just never had the connection point of sort of
Right.
practical application. I wasn't tracking anything growing up that had to do
Right.
with people
Mhm.
management and relationship management and sales and so on. And so, but
Were you
yeah, and
were
look,
you
I'll tell you a funny
popular?
story as a kid. So my first job ever was working in a video store. Shout out Video Biz, Eaton, Colorado.
I was gonna say
Nice.
Blockbuster, but all right, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Like
No, he meant mom and pop.
Yeah.
yeah, the independent
Yeah.
video store.
Nor do they shut
Uh,
down.
It's actually in Oregon where I live. I don't
Oh,
remember
really?
yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
it
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
It's a franchisee.
Yeah,
When he said that, I immediately thought of the movie Clerks, which we
there
won't
you go.
go into.
Yeah.
But yeah, got it.
No,
So so a video
um,
store, which
and
by
I
the way,
was
Quentin Tarantino
I was
also worked
really
at.
into film, and like
Yeah.
I wanted to be like a movie critic. Like I idolized
Yep.
Roger Ebert.
Oh.
Just as
Oh
crazy as
wow.
that is, that was like as I was growing up, a thing I had. Like I was really into film. I was really into movie critics. Like it was my first job. So
Yeah.
Oh
take that for what you
wow.
will.
Well, I was saying
Quentin
Quentin
Tarantino was
Tarantino.
really,
He that's how he watched as many videos because he was at a video store. And he
yeah.
was just always
I
consume
could really
videos.
relate to Tarantino, and ironically, he was like my favorite sort of
Me,
direct. Like watching Pulp Fiction was like
me
a
too.
change in my life, right? Like, yeah.
100%.
Hmm.
I watched Reservoir Dogs at the theater accidentally. Just went to the theater with my wife and just randomly picked the movie. Didn't know anything about it. I went into it and I came out of it going, "Oh, my life's changed." Okay, got it. Fair. That's awesome. So were you popular in school?
Yeah, I wasn't like the most popular, but I
Right.
was not unpopular.
Right.
In
Right. Right.
school, I
Right.
sort of hung with. I went to so look, I went to a really small school, and actually another interesting anecdote with me is we moved around a lot as kids, and
Right.
actually this maybe I've underappreciated until I got older. So, I went to probably like 6 different schools growing up.
So you had to make friends fast.
Exactly, and I
Yeah.
think that is something that helped me a lot with
Was it
people.
corporate movement or military movement?
It was so my dad did come from the military, but it wasn't really related to that. It was,
Okay.
as he was coming out of school and so on, he was an accountant. Then he went to become a CPA, and that required like moving somewhere to go to school. And then he got a job, and
Right.
then we moved somewhere else. And my mom's like, I don't like big cities. We moved to a small town. It's just a sort of combination of factors that contributed to it.
Yeah. That tracks. So Ryan has this question that I love: is what would a younger Taylor give advice to older Taylor? What do you think younger Taylor would have said to you now?
Wait, what would younger
Younger
Taylor?
Taylor.
Younger
Yeah.
Taylor, yeah. So
Yeah.
as a kid, talking to your older self that didn't exist yet,
Yeah. What
what
would
is
you
he?
advise?
What is he
What?
saying?
It doesn't even have to be advice. Like, what would?
Look, that's a great question. Look,
Yeah.
I will say that I think younger Taylor, was very much about taking risks, like was very much about going for it, right? Like sort of being uncomfortable enough to like, I'm going to go for the big move and I'm going to trust enough to sort of make that happen. And I have tried very much to maintain that as I've gotten older, but as you get older and more practical and more settled and so on, that gets challenging. So I think that would be what Taylor.
Has
Yeah.
that impacted the different jobs you've taken to
100%.
100%?
100%.
So
I mean,
what?
I've made some moves that at the time, I remember my mom like, what are
Scratching
you
heads.
doing? Like, what are you doing? You're going to regret this.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. You're
Yeah.
making so much money. Why are you thinking about moving
making
to
a
a
huge
startup?
mistake.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got that bit when I left Walmart, when I called my dad and mom and told them I was leaving Walmart. And they're like, "You make more than your father ever did. Why would you ever leave?" I'm like,
Because I can, Mom.
yes.
Because I can.
I couldn't tell her. I didn't have the words to tell her at the time. Now I understand. 100 years later, I understand why I did all those things. But at the time, I'm just like, I think it's time.
I thought you were going to say you didn't have the words to tell her you got fired. That's what I
No,
thought you were
no.
going to say. Well, Mom, they caught me
Whew.
stealing.
Absolutely, yeah,
Oh, good.
absolutely. Yeah,
So,
the HR called. Yeah,
Taylor, when was that moment you went from, we'll just say like everyday contributor employee to
yeah.
the next
Yeah.
significant bump when you realized, okay, I'm no longer this young individual contributor Taylor. I've got something real here and I can step up.
Yeah.
What was in your mind? What were you thinking?
So it's a great question. I'm going to kind of split it into two parts because I think I had sort of two pivotal moments for me that occurred. So the first was like the call center gig. I ended up staying with that company for like 6 years or so.
Oh wow.
And what I ended up
After college.
doing, yeah. So what ended up happening was that whole revelation of like, wow, I'm really good at this. Like that was not just me. Like the company was blown away. It was like you're almost doubling the best we've ever seen ever be done. So I
Yeah.
moved quickly into like a
That goes straight to, because that's churn. That goes straight to the bottom line.
yeah, no, exactly. The ROI on this position is like out of control, right? And
Right.
so I moved pretty rapidly into like a capacity of handling like the hardest escalations of the company and then also training, like flying around and kind of like training people to do this.
Right.
And then that moved into like being a manager. And then I was happy to see like, oh wow, these skills can translate into like helping other people be good at this. And I'll forever be grateful to the call center because it is a crazy cutthroat, like hiring hundreds of people, letting hundreds of people go, starting up new sites, like operational rigor and so on, like really intense role playing and stuff like that. Like it gave me this foundational skill set that was awesome. And my career grew pretty significantly with them. And I thought, Ryan, I kind of had that moment. Like at the end of that, I'm like, oh, I hate it. It's, but I was lacking the perspective of the larger corporate world and what happened. So I made a decision that like, okay, this is great, but I'm not going to be in the call center forever. So I moved sort of laterally over to ADP, giant company. in sort of this account manager capacity, trying to take this skill set and go and do something bigger. And that's when I landed in the identity space broadly, right? They just acquired this company that was effectively like background screening I-9 and so on.
Right.
And I was an account manager there for a while. And I did that for a number of years. And again, sort of great skill set, exposed me to a lot of different things, from sales to customer support to all kinds of different businesses. And then I had a leader that really believed in me and moved me to be a director of account management, basically go and oversee the entire team. And that was kind of the moment my career
Was that an
fundamentally
ADP
shifted, and
proper?
I had that
Was that
realization.
an ADP proper leader, or was that someone that came from the founding company?
It was an ADP proper leader. Yeah.
Wow. Were you in Jersey at the time?
No, I went to Jersey a lot, but this was the
Yeah.
acquisition was made out in Colorado, in Fort Collins, Colorado, was where this
Oh, okay.
acquisition was at. That's originally where I'm from. I was originally born in Boulder. I grew up throughout sort of Colorado areas, and
Yeah.
ended
So
up working.
you could snowboard. Got it.
I can definitely snowboard. Yeah, ski. I can ski.
Not
Brothers
me.
are younger than me, and they snowboard. By the time I was good at skiing, I'm like, I'm not switching to snow.
No.
Yeah, no. So Taylor, a quick question on. So William and I had these conversations a lot where the success you've had as a contributor doesn't, not you, but just in general,
Sure.
doesn't necessarily translate to a people manager, and people
Right.
fail at it miserably, and they can never get out of that run. Some people just aren't managers.
Right.
In your case, it obviously worked out, but what are your thoughts there? How does somebody go from an individual contributor where the company just loves them and puts them into a role of management or training other people? How do you
Yeah.
handle that?
No, it's a fantastic question, and so look, I have a lot of thoughts on this. The first is that the person has to want it. Not everyone does.
Right.
Some people are
That's
like,
right.
I just want to be an
Hmm.
individual contributor. I'm not
That's right.
interested in managing people and all the stuff that comes with that. It also is not just about managing people. All of a sudden now it's politics, it's
Mm-hmm.
corporate, it's meeting
Right.
expectations, it's managing up. It's like there's a world of different dynamics that happen in there. I found in my case, I loved all that stuff. Like I'm just like that. I'm built for business and this type of stuff. Not everyone's like that. And so I think people have to be honest about that is sort of step number one. What I would say, and then there's a whole sort of thing we get into around, I think, like what you can do to bridge the gap and be better. But like the thing that I'd say that I think gets lost in this conversation sometimes, my current boss, Blake, the CEO of ID.me, is big on this, and I believe so firmly in this that like if you're going to lead something, you also need to be like the best at doing that. Like you can't
100%.
lead a function of whatever business
Mhm.
development, lead a bunch of top star business development, and not be good at that yourself, or
That's right.
take whatever the instance
Right.
is. And so I do think, or I mean, you can, and there's tons of examples of that. I don't think it works
Yeah.
out particularly well, right?
Right.
And so, so I think that you have to be a good individual contributor or know the role and world really well, to have the credibility and respect of the
Of the
people
people.
then that are
Right.
working for you is another dynamic
Mhm.
that goes into that.
So what are some of
Oh,
the traits that you look for when you're I when I say it like this, there's certain types of people that thrive around me and that I thrive around.
Sure.
And so and that might be true for everybody, it might just be me, but like what do you look for, because you've done a ton of hiring through the years. What do you look for in candidates that 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 it's going to be a good fit for you and a good fit for the company and all that other stuff, but just it's going to work for you?
Yeah, good question. I mean, look, some of it, I'll just sort of caveat and get this out of the way. Like in a role like now, where it's like highly specialized, we're talking about digital identity and so on. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking for things that skill sets and experience that relate to that. But to answer your question more broadly, to me, like one of the big things is I want to see someone who's hungry and wants it, because like I can
Yeah.
teach all kinds of stuff and I can
Yeah.
rap, but I can't teach that. And I want
Ambition.
someone that's
Yeah.
really got ambition and wants
right.
it, cares about doing a good job, is really interested in it. Like there's so much you can do with a person like that,
Yeah.
especially with the right leadership, the right guidance, the right training, the right expectations, etc. And look, one of the number one rules at ID.me that I love is don't be a jerk. And I think that also is
Good
just
rule.
You remember
foundationally
you remember
important.
the success factors thing that they had? It was the no whatever holes. They had that at their corporate office, up on
Yeah.
a big giant wall. Like, hey, this is the deal.
Nice.
Just
Yep,
don't be
very
that
very
way.
similar at ID.me, right? And
Yep.
so I think also that like we don't want jerks, we want good cultural fit. We want
Yeah.
people that care about people, that people like being around, that
Right.
are going to have
Yeah.
each other's backs, that are empathetic, etc. So I also think that's what we don't want big egos, right? Like, that's not going
Yeah.
to be helpful. And so I think there's some softer factors like that also really have to come in. And so and then look also, like, again, the higher the position, you're also certainly looking for proof points, right? Like what
Right.
beyond what you're saying you could do, like what have you done, and then
Right.
what do other people say about what you've done as well is also a really
So this trips me out all the time. And Ryan, you've heard me say this before. When someone has on their LinkedIn profile or in their resume, led 42% growth in 2022. Now, I struggle with that. Did you do that?
Yeah.
Or did the team do that?
Were you part of a 60-person team?
Like the bullet point itself, there's no context to the bullet point. So like how do I get context? Okay, if you say I, team of one, did this.
Mhm.
Okay, I got context now. But most people don't do that.
Yeah.
So like how do you ferret that out? When you're talking to people, like it's a great thing. You grow the business 43%. Okay, hey, yeah, proof.
Yeah, no, look, this happens all the time, and I was literally just talking to some senior leaders the other day that were telling a story of interviewing like 3 different people who all claimed they did the exact same thing at a company. Right? It's like one of you is probably telling the truth, or
We're interviewing Jane tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Like, just want to let you know.
yeah,
I'd put them all. I'd put them all. It's like children. I'd put them all in the same room at the same time. Go. Okay.
exactly.
So you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah,
and you said, you
right.
said. All
Yeah.
right. Anyhow.
But look, I think there's a way to dig in on that gets at the context you're saying. So, like, well, tell me
Right.
more about how this was set up. Were you part of a larger team? What was your specific role in that? What did you I think there's a way to dig in on that, and then also look, I think it's just super important to back channel stuff, to like
Right.
actually get with references or people that worked with them to understand further what that person, is that person instrumental to this happening? Were they sort of the lucky recipient of being part of a team that really excelled?
Right.
It's a great point.
So throughout your career, where's the moment where you were just down, you were out,
Yeah.
and how did you motivate yourself, or who
Happens.
did you surround
Yeah.
yourself? Who'd you pull into your circle to say, I can keep going forward here? And kind of what was that, if you can share it? What was that roadblock?
Yeah.
How'd you overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a few. I'm trying to think of
You
the
said,
best.
let me get
You
my
want
book out.
you want this alphabetically or chronologically?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it just depends, I guess. So
Yeah.
I'll give you a kind of banger of a story that can coincide with this question. So I had to wrap up a previous question you asked, like ADP was also my moment of jumping into identity, and I became really sort of upset. Like it really clicked with me from a number of different angles. I'm like, this is super interesting, and it's like a huge miss across all kinds of different sectors and blah blah.
Right.
So I ended up being recruited by a company, which is how I ended up in Portland. That was all in on identity. The family brought me out here. Blah blah blah. I moved out here. That was one of the moments where my mom's like, "What are you doing?"
Why are you going here?
When the dog tilts its head sideways, like, you sure?
To basically like what was effectively a startup, like a very sort of impressive startup and so on, but a startup.
Right.
And after about 6 months, I realized two things happened. One, I realized the CEO and founder was not a good fit and was a problem for the company, and that's saying it very nicely.
Right.
And then number two, there was basically an incident that occurred where the services that the company was providing to the government had a moment of like, oh, this private company is too powerful. We're going to do this ourselves. And essentially kneecapped overnight like $70 million in revenue and took this big company.
Wow.
And so the bottom
You listen to your mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the moment I thought, buddy. That's what
Thanks. Thanks for the pylon,
Yeah.
Ryan.
How am I going to go home now?
Yeah. And so that was without question the hardest time in my career. And
Right.
it got really bad. I mean, because the company had been given a lot of money by a major financial institution that, flew on site. All the big investors came in. It like turned upside down. We had to pivot to acquisition. And so what I did is, one, I quickly found the right allies. So like I immediately like assess like, okay, who's yes men to the CEO, who's the problem, who's the right allies, and how do I build trust with them and figure out a collaborative way of working with them to make this better. And so that was a combination of some investors, some employees, and I sort of built that circle. The other thing I did is I led. I at the time I sort of thought, okay, I'm in a position where if the worst happens, I lose this job, I'm okay. I'm going to land on my feet. Like I'm going to not operate from a sense of fear, which is how a lot of the company was very much like, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to make the CEO mad. And I sort of just fundamentally leaned into it.
Right.
And then, that process essentially played out over somewhere around 6 to 9 months. And what ended up happening was we got the CEO out and also split the company and sold the company to Sterling, William. And that's how I ended up at Sterling.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then I came into Sterling and, ultimately became the head of identity and sort of worked that out. But it turned from a moment that was just crisis
Right.
to probably the greatest learning experience and development experience of my career.
So about I'd say 3 years ago, maybe longer, Ryan and I walking the floor of HR Tech, we noticed that a lot of the we'll say background screening companies, just kind of keep it simple for the audience, had bled into, because we grew up in talent acquisition, and so using something like a background screen on pre-hire made sense. Like if you didn't do it, that's just whatever. So it totally made sense. But they started to move into SaaS and do more uh, monitoring, employee monitoring, and basically continuing okay. Here we're not just going to do a pre-screen. We're going to do that for sure. What we're going to do is now get more into the business of understanding, hey, this guy's been with you for 7 years. You did a screen 7 years ago. Of course, that was great, but he's up for murder too.
Yeah.
And he doesn't necessarily have to disclose that. So what do you do as a company? How do you manage risk as an employer or as HR, et cetera? And why we found that fascinating is because the screening market, especially back then, was just up and down. Is up and down. You make money, and all of a sudden that's great. Have great contracts, but SaaS is more predictable. And so, like getting into that space and getting into the monitoring space, I thought, at least at the time, I thought that's genius because you can level out revenue. And yeah, you'll have some people that still just use you for pre-hire. That's fine. So what? But if you can build up the business of monitoring, that's a business that people at Wall Street can then kind of confirm and say, yeah, that's actually, we like that. We like that consistency, if you will. So you lived in that world while all that stuff was going on with maybe your own company, but also kind of in larger, some of the other companies, some of the other players. What, first of all, outsider looking in, we saw it as a great idea. What did y'all see it as? Like, what was the impetus on the inside?
Yeah, I mean, look, there were two big realizations specific to the screening industry as I came into Sterling, and it was very interesting time as I came in. There was a new CEO that came in, a lot of sort of shift in the executive leadership, and just broadly speaking, there were two giant priorities that happened. So one was identity, which was just this fundamental, like, this is missing, this is crazy. We don't confirm someone is who they say they are before we screen them, and that was obviously my bag and led to a lot of what I did there. The second was exactly what you're talking about, which is the similar sort of like, this is crazy. People screen someone one time and then not afterwards, and like that's also doesn't make sense. And then all the downstream, financial implications and sort of valuation implications and so on around ongoing revenue stream and SaaS and just different models and so on. So really leaned into it is what I saw from both my company as well as the broader sort of screen set. I mean, look, I'm not directly in the industry anymore, but I think there's still a long way to go. I think the industry is still disproportionately slanted around pre-employment as a singular
Yep.
check and disproportionately not including identity. But I think that it's inevitable that it all
Right.
moves in that direction.
Especially with AI. I mean, we haven't even touched on that. I know we will, but it's one of those deals. Like, again, if we didn't know before that person was that person, now we've got AI and generative AI. How are we ever going to trust that that person is that person?
It's a completely different world we live in now. Most companies and individuals are not prepared at all.
Right.
And the speed and scale at which AI is operating is incredible. So we're seeing everything from deep fakes in interviews to you can imagine in terms of sort of how AI is implemented. So yeah, it's never been a more important time of understanding who someone is and having the tools around that to protect themselves.
Have you heard? This is when did we do this story on the investors or whatever it was? Was it in Japan? I think it was, or
Oh
something.
yeah.
Yeah,
It was a deep fake, and it was
it was an
everything was
investor
done
call.
with. It was an investor call, and everyone on the call was deep faked, and they got an investment this
It's like
investor,
20
and
million
none
or
of it
something.
was real. And all these players were on Zoom, and they're playing these parts, and they were putting up presentations, and it was manufactured in such a way where it looked real. It was real
Yeah.
because they were arguing with each other. No. Tammy, you don't have that right. Let me pull up this slide, and it
Yeah.
looked real, like it was
Hmm.
all choreographed in such a way where it was a lot of money, and this investor was like, I'm all in. I love it. I'm down. Give me the wiring instructions and give me the
Yeah, no,
contract.
look, there's a lot of these stories now, and they should all be awareness and wake up calls for people. I mean, there's one I'm thinking about where there was a CFO that was deep faked that approved some giant transfer of money that went through, and the CFO was like, I didn't do that. So we're just fundamentally in a different spot. And the truth is, it's not just employers. I mean, financial institutions, healthcare institutions, everyone is woefully underprepared for this. They're largely using tools that don't make the cut now in today's day and age. Because look, it's beyond deep fakes. Everyone knows about like Chat GPT. There's also Worm GPT and Fraud GPT, and there's these tools that have been twisted to bad
Hmm.
actors to use. And
Yep.
like IDME has a front row seat to that, and we protect the United States Treasury, right? Like we're the front door to the IRS. You guys can imagine the type of
Oh,
sophisticated fraudsters that are coming in there that are
that's right.
using every technique possible to come in with deep fakes and everything you can imagine. And so what we see from our weekly, we monitor the dark web. We learn from each of these instances. We trace them down to what country they came from, what tools they're using, etc. And we're in a very, very interesting time when it comes to fraud right now.
That is interesting. I want to hear some
Leader.
stories now. I
Yeah.
feel
Well,
like there's stories there we need to
I
know
don't think you really do want to hear these stories because it's gonna set your weekend off in a bad way. So
Probably would.
so you've mentioned Leaders at Quest and ADP and startup not to be named and Sterling and your current leader. Is there anything that's gone across any traits that's kind of gone across those leaders that you love, like that you're drawn to, or maybe drawn away from,
No, actually,
repelled?
that's a great question, and it's something that I think is a huge part of my journey in career growth.
Right.
Because without the leaders that I had, there's zero question I wouldn't be in the position that I am today. I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't have the skill set I have today. Like I I think some of it happened by luck and subconscious decision, whatever, as I was early in my
Right.
career. And then I've been much more conscious of sort of I mean, a huge part of why I'm at IDMe is because the leader that's here. And I had gotten lucky enough to like sort of know him for years prior to coming to this. But I mean, look, I'm drawn to people that, similar as I said, I was looking at people that are ambitious, people that aren't afraid to take moonshots, people that see the bigger picture, right? Like that type of leader that is sort of unbound, unconstrained, willing to challenge norms. That I'm really drawn to that, and I find that really empowering. and has been really helpful for me throughout my career. And I think I've been blessed to have a number of leaders that really believed in me, that empowered me, that mentored me, that helped when I made mistakes and so on, that challenged me. So leaders are often everything. They many times, I think the old adage is, people don't leave companies, they leave managers or leaders or whatever the saying is, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Taylor, do you look at those leaders as mentors to you, or just leaders in the company that you just aligned with?
It's a
Cool
great
question.
question. Look, throughout my whole career, there's been some of both, but what has happened is there's been a good number that I'd put in the mentor category, right? That relationships have been formed that have transcended the actual work engagement. People that I've stayed in touch with throughout that I still talk to, etc. So a little bit of both, but really been blessed to have a number of mentors.
Where's that crossover? So when do you consider that leader a mentor?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a straightforward answer for you, other than like
When they start caring about you more than the
yeah,
outcomes.
exactly. Like I think that's it. I think that's it.
You're not supposed to give them the answer.
I know.
You got to make them sweat and struggle.
You know how I am. It's just I thought it, and I'm like, well,
No,
at least
that's spot on. I mean, look, a great leader is going to be very effective with you in the capacity that you're working within that company.
Right.
He's going to really do everything they can for you to nail it within that company and for the team to nail it. And that's a lot. Like we need a lot of people like that. I think when you get into mentor, it crosses over into best interest aligning with you. And really looking at the bigger picture with you. In other words, like I'll give you some examples, like caring about your career enough to where they're supporting your growth, even if it means moving outside of
That's
right.
That's right. It's against their own personal interests.
Okay.
Their own personal interest would be to keep you. Like I'm thinking about the person at ADP in that particular instance. That person whom you had a great bond with, they could have easily, not necessarily kneecapped you, but they could have tried to keep you, and because you were obviously great at what you did, they could have kept you.
Right.
But they said, no, you need to actually go out and do these other things and fly and be successful, make mistakes, do all that stuff. So I think great mentors, they'll, for at least for me in my definition, they'll do things that are against their own personal interests.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. And I mean, we work with a lot of great leaders that I think struggle with that, and so I think that's a great sort of challenge to all leaders to really think in that way. And I think the results they'll find over the course of their career will be incredible.
So regrettable turnover is something I've been thinking about lately. In the history of all my hiring and all the people that I've worked with, etc., there's only 3 people out of all of those people that I wish I could have kept them. I wish I would have known. Like in all 3 cases, I was blindsided. That, hey, Will, can I talk to you real quick? Yeah. Anyhow, I got this other opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And I did, I always supported it and supported them, but I wish I would have known in advance because I'd have given them a kid. Seriously, like, dude, take my house, whatever. I don't care. Just please stay. But at 3 out of thousands. So do you have any stories of regrettable turnover where people
that have left that I've really regretted? I like it. Yeah. 2 of them, and I'll tell you quick anecdotes about each. So one was just unfortunate, and I guess it goes back to the prior conversation where it was just this person that was incredibly skilled, that was so obviously skilled beyond her current role. And we at the company I was at the time just didn't have the right career. Like the career pathing wasn't there for her because the person that was in the role where she wanted to go to was very strong. They weren't leaving anytime soon. And so it was just like an acceptance of like, look, this is what's best for you. You're absolutely right. Hate to live, but it was very unfortunate. The second one was when I was at ADP, and she left, had an amazing opportunity, went to Visa. And I ended up righting that ship, and I have now brought her back into IDME, and she's the director. So That
Oh, that's
one might be right
fantastic.
over
Very
there at
nice.
Walmart.
You left, but I will find a way.
All
Oh,
right,
that's genius. Go ahead.
Taylor, last question for me today is what is keeping you up tonight? Like, what are you thinking about that's just like, I really need to solve this problem?
Work related.
Yeah.
Work related.
Yeah.
Yes, work related.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care
Yeah.
about your
Yeah.
garage. I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I do.
The
I do.
wine, the box of wine doesn't show up, or the case of wine isn't showing up until Monday.
Yeah.
That's a different. That's a different
Yeah.
issue.
No, look, it's a very appropriate question for sort of where I'm at in my career with this company. And here's what I'd say, and I'll try to make this as concise answer as possible. Like, we're at this very interesting sort of crossroads within the space of identity, where we really need to have digital identity. We really need to not have hundreds of passwords and usernames and all these problems. But there's this real shift in terms of how identity is being done. So historically, it's always been kind of behind the scenes. Users' data is sort of sold by these data brokers, and you punch in information to a bank, and they like, is this William? Is this right SSN? And like, is the device he's on right? And you're sort of not a part of it. And what ID.me represents is a complete difference in that model. It's all consumer permissioned, right? It's all, you know exactly what you're doing. You own your identity. It moves with you. We don't ever sell information. When you need to provide information, you consent. You see exactly what information you are sharing. And we're not the only, there are other companies doing this, but it's winning that. It's winning the battle to reusable ID and consumer permission data, and moving out of this age where all of our data is abused and used and we don't know and attacked and it's blah, blah, blah. And you're in control of your information. And what keeps me up at night is ID.me is really close to accomplishing this. Like, we are like have made incredible progress. We have 125 million members. Almost 50% of the US adult population has an ID.me account. Almost 60 million are strongly identity proof. Like, we've made a real movement in this. And so it's seeing that through, which I think there's a window of the next 12 to 18 months of really seeing that through, really moving, really educating people about this shift. That's a big part of my job, and that's a big part of what keeps me up at night.
All right, last question for me, Taylor, is you're going to write a book. What's the subject of the book? It can't be about identity, by the way. It can't be. And so you're going to write a book. What are you going to write a book about? You're like, why did I join this show?
Yeah, right. How to avoid William's income. No, I'm going to write a book about
Let
I
me know
think
how.
what my younger self would have told me about taking risks, about not being afraid to take risks. I've met too many people in my life, and many people who I care about, that have stunted their own growth, whether personally or professionally, because they're just not comfortable taking that leap. And I think that's a huge part of what I've been proud of, what I've been able to do, and something that I might be able to teach others. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
No net.
Don't want to be 75 and regret.
Correct.
Exactly.
I'd rather have failed at something by a 100%. Mile than look back and say, I should have done.
Drops mic, walks off stage. Taylor, we knew you'd be wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show and breaking down things and telling us a little bit about your journey.
Appreciate you both. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to the audience. Love y'all.